Well, Joe Sestak is a former Democratic congressman. He joins me now from Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us. Now, the comment on Palestine, let's start there, if we could. What he said about no partner for peace and various other elements, I suppose, are just fairly common currency among a large number of the Republican Party. But the suggestion that that means that we shouldn't even bother pursuing it as a policy statement would seem to be rather odd for a presidential candidate, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would, Tamor. The United States has always been stronger when its leadership has been engaged in the world. I happened to work in the White House for President Clinton. When I saw him help resolve an almost centuries-long problem in Northern Ireland, conflicts between the Catholics and the British, but by our leadership and by being there, and as more as an honest broker, was able to leave that region and the world, quite frankly, much more peaceful. So it may take us years to resolve this Palestinian-Israeli issue, but I think the elements that say the Palestinians don't care for what all human beings care for, an economically viable life, a state of their own, I think is wrong. And well, I think you've got
to wonder why he said it then, don't you? Because even Benjamin Netanyahu in the past, I mean, he has said a number of things, but there was one occasion when Netanyahu said this Palestinian government is the best that he's ever worked with. So was Mitt Romney just ignorant of the situation? Was he just saying something off the cuff for an audience that he thought might appreciate it? Or is there a subtext here?
You know, I think there's two. One is, at times I do wonder if within foreign policy he just doesn't get it. As, for example, he said Russia is the United States' #1 strategic threat in the world. Russia with a broken military? But on the other hand, I do know that Mr. Romney, as governor, was quite a thoughtful man. So I don't know if this is just more of a little bit of less experience with the world combined with a bit of political theater. I would like to think it is. But when he said, after our embassy had been besieged in Egypt, that all his advisors, or we were told, had recommended to him his statement that came out rashly in the middle of the night and was criticized wisely, it worries me not just about Mr. Romney, but those who might come into this administration and actually think we should treat the world with benign neglect instead of using our leadership for more peace and prosperity and, frankly, for our security interests that ensue from that.
From what I've been hearing from Mr. Romney, benign neglect towards the rest of the world is the last thing on his agenda. Let's look at what he had to say about Iran. I mean, you mentioned his comments about Russia, but he also seems to think that Iran is perhaps the most powerful nation in the world. These comments that all Iran has to do is smuggle some, quote, fissile material to Chicago and America will have to buckle to its will seems a little bit odd as well, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Look, there is not a question in the world that we have to worry about proliferation concerns. We actually X-ray certain container ships before they leave foreign ports, before they come up the Delaware River, for example, in Philadelphia. But to assume that a country is about to do that tomorrow, I think, shows a willful misunderstanding of the world. And when I say benign neglect, there's a difference. There are those that think our U.S. military can actually fix problems. No, stop problems. When I was in the military 30 years, fixing problems takes an engagement in the world where you're willing to work with other nations on a respectful basis, carrots and sticks to our diplomacy and our economic aid and sanctions. That type of benign neglect, where then you're forced to use your military to stop some problem that you could have prevented, I think is harmful to the world and, most importantly, U.S. interests.
Well, let's finish off with where we started, the situation in Palestine. I mean, as a military man, do you think that it's likely that Iran is going to be smuggling hundreds of rockets to park in a Palestinian state and aim them at Israel? And just as a supplementary to that, I mean, is there a possibility that Romney's comments simply reflect what a lot of people think is the underlying truth of Netanyahu's strategy, and that is the longer we postpone peace, the more time they've got to settle?
You know, no, I don't agree with that. Here's my viewpoint. Sure, Iran does have some undue influence through Syria, where it's been able to funnel arms to Hamas, to Hezbollah. All that said, the Gulf Cooperative Council states know through which it must go to get arms, as Mr. Romney described, through their countries in order to get them to the West Bank and other places. They know that after Israel and the United States, there are elements in Iran that feel that they, the Gulf Cooperative Council states, are next on the list as far as an adversary. Look, this is why we have to do better than we're doing in helping to resolve the situation in Syria in order to remove Iranian influence in that country, and then to work as we're trying to do with an international coalition to stop Iran from pursuing a nuclear capability. All that said, I think Mr. Romney, at times a thoughtful man, has shown in too many cases that he has not thought through how to be a commander-in-chief with thought, with resolution, and with a positive engagement in the world, where the military is the backbone, not the ribcage of how we advance our challenges throughout this great globe of the world.
Joe Sestak in Washington for your comments.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the French